Good morning. This is Steve McMillan, Chairman of the Finance and Capital Committee of WMATA. We'll be starting today's board meetings with our committee. But first, I'd like to begin with our safety contact from Chief Safety Officer Teresa Impastato. Teresa, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Today's safety contact focuses on mental health and coping with stress and anxiety. The coronavirus disease COVID-19 pandemic may be very stressful for people. Fear and anxiety about this disease can be overwhelming and can cause strong emotions in adults and children. Public health actions such as social distancing can make people feel isolated and lonely and can increase stress and anxiety. However, these actions are necessary to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Coping with stress in a healthy way will make you, the people you care about, and your community stronger. Taking care of your friends and family can be a stress reliever, but it should be balanced with care for yourself. During times of increased social distancing, people can still maintain social connections and care for their mental health. Phone calls or video chats can help you and your loved ones feel socially connected, less lonely, and less isolated. As the holidays approach, remaining connected with friends and loved ones is increasingly important. If you or someone you know are experiencing stress and anxiety, there are numerous resources available to you, including the Disaster Distress Helpline, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and the Veterans Crisis Line, among others. For more information about available resources and tips for coping with the stress of the pandemic, visit cdc.gov. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. Since this is the first meeting of the day, I'd ask the Board Corporate Secretary, Jennifer Ellison, to call the roll.
Thank you. Chair McMillan?
Here.
Vice Chair Marudian?
Present.
Alternate Director Graham?
Present.
Director Smedberg?
Present.
Alternate Director Rouse?
Present.
Director Gideby?
Present.
Director Goldman?
Present.
And Director Letourneau?
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Staff presenting on today's call, please introduce yourself with your name and title, and we will now begin the meeting. First of all, I trust everyone has a chance to review today's agenda. If there are no objections to the agenda, we'll consider it approved and as presented. Any objections? No? Okay, the agenda is approved. Next, we have minutes from our previous meeting before us before approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider those approved as presented as well. So today we have one item on the agenda, proposed revisions to Metro's fiscal year 2021 budget. In the face of the challenges presented by the continued pandemic, the board must, for the third time, act on the 2021 budget. In this revised plan, we have taken a conservative approach, which should provide clarity and stability for our stakeholders as we move forward. With the dramatic decline in passengers and fare revenue, our service and financial model has been thrown out of balance. Federal dollars have delayed and mitigated service impacts, but as we move towards the budget process for 2022, the region will have to grapple with even more serious choices. So for today's discussion, I would note that Mr. Devin Rouse will be participating in Mr. Horner's place since he's recused from this matter. And Secretary Slater could not join us today, so Mr. Tom Graham is participating in his place. Finally, due to the significant nature of the proposed changes in the budget today, all board members are eligible to vote on this item, not just committee members. For our presenters, as a reminder, please introduce yourself, and other participants, please mute your microphones so we can cut down on background noise. With that, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Wiedefeld and his team to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Paul Wiedefeld, General Manager and CEO of Metro. And if we could pull up the slides. The purpose of today's meeting is threefold. The first is to review the 21 operating budget estimates based on the Q1 financial results, basically the actuals that we have received since we last met and discussed this in September. We will also be presenting the staff report that summarizes the public participation and seek approval of Title VI equity analysis based on what we took out to the public. And then we are going to recommend the adoption of the revised 2021 operating budget, giving both the latest financial information and what we heard from the public and from the board members. The pandemic, the budget again remains in serious conditions given the pandemic. It's much slower than we had all hoped for in May when we approved the budget. The pandemic, and with the pandemic rebounding, obviously we are very concerned about the remainder of this fiscal year. Fortunately, relatively fortunately, through aggressive both cost management and also getting the actuals from what service we had provided during the first quarter of the year, the CARES Act actually will carry us a little bit further than initially anticipated, which is roughly the end of the calendar year. It will now take us again roughly to March. As you can imagine, this changes as bills come in, but basically we believe it will now carry us through March. And by doing that, it has reduced the operating budget gap from what we had proposed or what we had estimated in September of $212 million down to $176.5 million. And this chart is just to give everyone sort of a recap of where we've been. On the first column, basically is where we were pre-COVID. It's important to note that the ridership at that time was actually increasing at a fair clip. We were in a very good position. The budget in 21 in May, as the board approved it, we all understood that things were flexing, but that basically we needed a budget to proceed, and that's what that column represents. In September, the 21 budget again shows us where we were in September in our thinking, and now the revised plan reflects what we know based on the actual dollars that we received. The bottom line is that basically the $212 million hole that we were trying to fill is now down to 176.5. Revenues continue to be significantly a big part of the problem. Our fare revenue significantly dropped, as you can see in this chart, and our non-fare revenues, meaning particularly parking and advertising, have also dropped. So the revenues are down roughly $203 million. On the next slide, with the projected revenues down to 203, we do have our additional COVID expenses have remained relatively the same from September to now, but the net incremental savings, meaning the savings we've gotten through reduced overtime, reduced fuel costs, reduced energy costs, other savings that we've been doing that we now have actual numbers on, have saved us roughly $35 million, which is what generates that new gap of $176 million. So with that as sort of the financial background, I would like Lynn Bowersax and Tom Webster to give an update on what we heard from the public, and then I'll come back and talk about where we are going forward in the budget. Lynn, if you could.
Thank you, Paul. So we have, despite the pandemic, been able.
Lynn, sorry, Steve, pardon the interruption here. 1 second. Could we check the YouTube feed for audio, please? Sorry about that. I got a couple texts saying there was no feed on the, or no audio feed on the YouTube.
No worries, standing by.
Sorry, apologize. We are having audio come through. Okay, a couple people said there was no audio feed. Okay. Okay, thanks, Stan. Sorry, Lynn. Sorry, Steve.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Yes, sir. So despite the pandemic, we were able to reach out to more than 5,000 members of the public in multiple languages, both in our system and online. We also took the opportunity, as you can see here in the photo, to give out some masks to riders, which is part of our larger effort. We have we had a compact public hearing, as indicated here, which many people participated in online and then submitted comments via email as well. In the next slide, you'll see that we had more than 3,000 people who participated in our survey. And on the next slide, as you'll see, about a third of those were low income and minority members of the public that we serve. Overwhelmingly, there was support for the proposals, both on the rail side and the bus side. 7 out of 10 on bus, 8 out of 10 on rail, who were supporting the proposals. The lowest level of support, well, it was over 50%, was for the rail hours of service proposal, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. On the next slide, you'll see that the support was really driven by the temporary nature of the proposals. And among our bus customers, we really saw the greatest concern about the temporary nature of proposals. There were a lot of write-in comments on the survey about worry that these would become permanent reductions. On the next slide, you'll see what I was describing as the rail hours of service, softer support. Just to highlight a few comments that I think are representative of what people told us. One individual who works at the Whole Foods in Tysons but lives in the district talked about getting off after 9 p.m. and needing the services to get back home. Another person talked about working downtown, needing to get back to Prince George's County late at night after their shift, and that ride would cost them $100 on Uber if they didn't have the service. And then there was a doctor who's an emergency department doctor at the Washington Hospital Center who talked about shifts being at different times and needing the rail service to get them to and from their very important job during a pandemic. The concerns that we heard also included community-based concerns about the impacts on businesses. People are concerned that restaurants and other venues will suffer from the 9 p.m. closing. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll hand it off to my colleague Tom Webster to talk about the final Title VI equity analysis.
Thank you, Lynn. Metro conducted the required Title VI equity analysis, evaluating the impact of major service changes on minority riders and low-income riders, in accordance with Metro's Title VI program plan and FTA administration, Federal Transit Administration requirements. And although service reductions impact customers, riders, and the communities that those services provide service to, the analysis concluded that there was no disparate impact for minority populations for either the bus or rail mode, and no disproportionate burden for low-income populations, either for bus or for rail. And just for the board and the public's information, there's a detailed analysis and memorandum attached to the resolution under consideration this morning. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Paul.
Thank you, Tom. If I could, I would like to go back to the last slide I presented during the budget portion at the beginning. No, I'm sorry, you can keep going forward there. Thank you. Slide 14, please. Thank you. All right, so this is where we left off, which is basically from in the September plan, we had a hole of roughly 212 million. Again, given the actions that have been taken and the actual numbers, that number has now been reduced to 176.5. So we look at some of the actions that were initially proposed and what we're proposing now. So the management actions initially were at 42.6. We reduced that to 30.5, and I'll explain that in a minute. In terms of board actions, the board actions required have gone down from 169 to 146. We still do recommend the capital projects of roughly $30 million, but we reduced the amount of service cuts from 139 to 116, again, which adds up to the $176 million hole to fill. In terms of some of the management actions that we are now suggesting, one is to retain, if you recall, we had initially suggested, given the size of the hole, that we go to one station manager per station. We believe it's much safer, obviously, to have the stations maintained at roughly at each kiosk. So that's what that's bringing that back in. There are some other things that we're going to do to reduce some of the costs still on the station manager side, which is roughly the 0.6 million there. In terms of non-rep employees, we do having a 5-day furlough. Again, given the scale of the operation that we're doing right now, we're not recommending that further at this time. And we will continue, obviously, to focus on any additional savings that we can do, which we estimate at another $1 million. This is a little bit further detail, basically, on sort of the ups and downs of some of those numbers that I just talked about, which that supports, in effect, the $12 million that have been reduced. The one thing I do want to mention here, I'm sorry, if you could go back. The one thing I do want to mention here is on the NRP, just so people understand that that's non-representative personnel. Which means basically anyone that's not part of a union is not getting any type of raises this year. It's important to recognize that under the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements we have with the different unions, they will be getting their raises. And that is the vast majority of our workforce, over 10,000 plus people, just so that people do understand that. So management / people that are not represented by unions have taken a cut. In terms of some of the service changes that we're proposing, again, since based on what we heard and the ability to bring back some things that we initially had suggested for cuts, on the Metro Rail side, bringing back the turnbacks on the red and yellow line, not doing those turnbacks. And then on the rail service, as Lynn mentioned, that was one thing that we heard clear from the public, is if we could extend the service to 11 p.m. As you recall, we were suggesting reduce it to 9 p.m. On the Metro bus side, we've taken a hard look at where we're having issues on the bus system and have proposed a number of changes there to bring back more service in that area as well. And here's just some of the examples of that and some of our thinking behind that. This is sort of the financial side of those changes to, again, show you how this plays out by each one of those. The big thing here I want to mention is that we do still plan to restore bus fares in Q3. So that basically is January 1. So that's important to understand. We will be adding additional bus service and we'll be adding additional hours to the rail service and not doing the turnbacks. Here's the list of some of the bus service improvements that we'll be doing. Obviously, we can take questions on these, but this just gives you a sort of a summary of those bus lines that will have some improvements that we had not anticipated in September. We did receive some other requests, and additional requests. Some of those were already on the list I just showed you, but others that we did receive that we're not recommending for including in the budget are listed here, primarily because of compared to the other routes that we're doing and the demand we see on those other routes, that these did not meet those. As you know, these routes aren't being run now, given the conditions of the pandemic. The other concern we have is, as we start to think about fiscal year 22 and the stress will be under there, the potential of bringing these back and unfortunately not being able to do them at that time period would be another issue, I think, for our customers. So with that, the staff is recommending that the board accept the public participation in the equity analysis, and then also the proposed changes that we have suggested for the budget. And with that, we will be glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Riefeld. First, before we get into the discussion, can I ask for a motion and a second from members of the committee?
This is Jeff. I'll make the motion.
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
All right, moved by Mr. Meridian, seconded by Mr. Smedberg. So now we'll move to questions and comments. Just starting with a brief comment from myself. My compliments to both the staff that managed the public outreach process for this particular proposal, and to the general public and our local governments who took part in it. I think valuable feedback was obtained, and helped make this a more palatable, logical, stronger proposal as a result. It's obviously not where we started when we began considering this budget year, but what we have as a result, I think, represents a responsible path forward given the circumstances we're in. So with that, I'll move on to Mr. Meridian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll echo your comments there. Appreciate the staff's hard work on this, and certainly this is not where we thought we would be at the start of the year, but it's where we are, and I appreciate how much hard work went into this.
Thank you. Mr. Graham.
Only to thank staff for their hard work on this effort. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Smedberg.
I too want to echo your remarks, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the cooperation that everyone gave to this and the compromise, obviously, and appreciate the work of the general manager and his team to get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse.
Yeah, I'll too thank all the effort that's gone into this. I mean, you look at the numbers, we're down, what, almost 20% ridership, a little over 22% of what our revenue expectations were. I mean, the reality is that's seems like a simple math problem, but it has a real world impact on a lot of people. And I think a lot of effort has gone into this from a lot of people on your staff, Paul, and just in general from the community. And it's important. And thank you for everything you've tried to look at and all the different angles you've investigated for this for us.
Thank you. Ms. Gideby.
I too want to echo my appreciation. I also just want to thank the GM for finding the balance and the team for hearing the voices of the riders and also the businesses in the region as it relates to the impact of late night service. I want to bring and offer the human perspective around our employees who are non-reps who have been working every single day since the pandemic and haven't had the AB schedule nor the raises. And so the thought process of them also having to take furloughs seems drastic. And so I thank you for being willing, because the budget was so difficult, to put that on the table, but I'm happy that we were able to restore it. I also am grateful, especially for many of the buses that have been restored or increased because of crowding, that we are taking all of those factors into consideration. As we move forward, I hope that these are some of the things that we would look at, that even though we have set some really bold policies as to what we wanted to do this year, that we still will also find the balance of making sure that this is less about just policies and the people who are most impacted by our decision. I also want to thank Tom Webster on the Title VI equity analysis. While I still have kind of my own issues with how the federal government did not necessarily make it a requirement, I'm appreciative of this team for making sure that we were able to really do our part and ensure that we heard the voices appropriately. So thank you all for the work that you have done to get us to this point during this difficult time.
All right, Mr. Goldman.
I'll echo what my colleagues have said and appreciate the efforts that the general manager and staff have put in to reach this compromise that allows us to go forward with a balanced budget that reflects an ability to meld differences between bus riders and rail riders, different groups of rail riders, some wanting shorter headways and some wanting longer hours of service, as well as the demands of the different jurisdictions. So it's a good compromise, both for transportation policy and the needs of the jurisdictions. Having said that, I did want to ask a few questions and focus on slide number 19 to just bring some clarity in some of the proposals that are going on here. And preliminarily, of course, I'm very grateful on behalf of Montgomery County as well as Red Line riders that we will not see the despised turnbacks returned for the rest of this fiscal year. And so Red Line riders won't be discriminated between those who live north and south of those turnback points of Grosvenor and Silver Spring on the east side. And I think that's great. Having said that, in the first line on rail, standardized weekly rail service frequencies, we've somehow lost about 10 million in savings here, which is partly, I think, attributed to the longer hours, 9 to 11 for rail service. But my question is, what else is in there that reflects that loss of savings? Since I think an earlier slide indicated that the longer hours had a cost of about 5.5 million.
Mr. Goldman, this is Paul Wiedefeld, Dennis
Yes.
from Wayne as well. But basically what's occurring there, and you also see it on the line in terms of retention of August service plan, part of that is time. Because originally we were anticipating that this would kick in January, but now since it doesn't kick in until mid-February, literally the cost of time is what that's reflecting.
Okay, and I think that was the same answer on the bus, that essentially, even though you're running the same August service
Correct.
pattern, the reason you're showing less savings is because this is for the full year through June 30th.
Yes,
Correct. Thank you.
starting in February versus January.
Thank you. The other point I just wanted to commend the general manager and management on is, and this slide is very helpful here, is really in reducing the cost of lost jobs from the 1,700 in the September plan to a little over 1,400 in the revised plan. And even for those 1,400, I want to commend management for announcing a buyout proposal that will essentially encourage people at retirement age with a buyout bonus to retire early, so there won't have to be, or at least we will be able to minimize the number of involuntary job losses that will result from Metro employees. And perhaps, Paul, you could just describe that buyout proposal in a little more detail, since it hadn't been done in your initial remarks on the budget. And that's the end of my comments.
Sure, just very briefly, what that is anyone that is currently at retirement age, whether you're a represented employee or a non-represented employee, basically we're offering $15,000 if you were to retire now. Clearly, the goal of that is to reduce those filled positions that would have to be, again, voluntarily eliminated. So we will see what happens with that. We also continue to look very closely at vacancies and only fill in those vacancies that primarily have a safety position associated with them, or some other core function. Again, we're just trying to push that number down as far as we possibly can to, again, not impact the economic well-being of those people that unfortunately may have to be laid off.
And just for the sake of clarity for all the employee groups, the retirement age is it 65 for all employee groups, or does it vary by collective bargaining?
It varies by numbers of years of service and age, so it's different. So, but individual, we're going to work literally. We will be putting out something to all of our employees in literally an application process, so they can see how this all works for them, and then they need to make a personal, their own personal decision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo what the others said about the process here. Appreciate all the staff work into it. This topic has been with us for quite a while now, and it's evolved. And I think we've done a good job with public outreach. We've done a good job with outreach to the broader community, elected officials, those impacted by these changes. And I think we've done a good job overall minimizing the impacts of the changes, considering what we have to do. The one thing I will mention that I'm not going to make an issue of today, given that we're instituting a budget amendment for FY21, but I do want to have a greater discussion about for FY22 is the turnback issue. Simply because we use terms like discrimination and equity on the board quite a bit. But when you look at the actual ridership numbers, you could easily make a case that some of the Virginia stations deserve more service than they're going to get, and that the red line stations and the yellow and green line stations that would have been impacted by the turnback don't necessarily warrant 6-minute headways. Ultimately, the turnback issue is about 6-minute versus 12-minute headways. And with all the great respect to everyone else, there's nothing magical about riders at those stations where they necessarily deserve greater service than those that use Metro in Virginia, who have equal numbers at some of these stations. So I do want us to look at that more holistically next time. I will point out that 72% of red line riders actually found reinstating the turnbacks acceptable, and 71% of yellow and green line riders. So, which is to me an absolutely remarkable result in the public input. So, I think that we need, perhaps it's not necessarily turnbacks in the way that we've talked about them, but we all know that the FY21 amendments we're making here are sort of the tip of the iceberg, absent some significant changes that may come from the federal government or others for FY22. So I will just say that on this issue of rail service, we need to look at this equitably and fairly for the entire system, including Virginia, when we start looking at headways. And I hope that for FY22, we can do that. But otherwise, appreciate in particular bringing back some of the management actions that we were looking at having to cut. I strongly support, as my colleague Ms. Gideby talked about, what we were able to do, bringing back the NRP raises and not having to furlough those folks, as well as some of the things we've done with station management. So I just think that's a good thing for the overall system. So thanks for everybody's work on this, and we've got more work to do.
Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Wiedefeld,
Yes.
General Manager. I want to clarify, Mr. Letourneau just mentioned that we will be bringing back raises for non-rep employees. But that's unfortunately, we will not be able to.
Not raises.
Furloughs.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Thank you, sorry, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I misspoke, thank you.
No problem.
I knew I had misspoken the second I said it, so.
But I have a number of people that would, I just had to clarify that for them.
No, absolutely.
Right. All right, thank you. Well, with that, I will close out discussion on this item and ask the board corporate secretary to administer the roll call vote.
Chair McMillan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Meridian,
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham,
Aye.
Director Smedberg,
Aye.
Alternate Director Rouse,
Aye.
Director Gideby,
Aye.
Director Goldman,
Aye.
Director Letourneau.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. And so with no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. I note that there will be a special Finance and Capital Committee meeting on Friday, December 4th to discuss the general manager's fiscal year 2022 budget proposal. So we will take a brief break before beginning Safety and Operations Committee. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Michael Goldman, Chair of the Safety and Operations Committee. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have today's agenda before us. If there are no objections, I'd like to move to approve the agenda as presented. Are there any objections? Seeing none, hearing none, the agenda is approved. Our other administrative business is the approval of minutes. We have had minutes for our last meeting before us for approval. I trust that everyone has had the opportunity to review the minutes from our October 8th meeting. Unless there are objections, we will consider the minutes as well approved as presented. Are there any objections? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. Thank you. We have two items on our agenda today. The first is the approval of name changes for two Metro Rail stations, the ones at Tyson's Corner and Prince George's Plaza, that were requested by our partner jurisdictions, Fairfax County and Prince George's County Executive, respectively. Next, our Chief Safety Officer will update the board on Metro's progress in addressing corrective action plans, or CAPs, CAPS, issued by the National Transportation Safety Board and Metro's own state safety oversight organization, the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission. I'll now turn the floor over to Ms. Bowersox for our first item on the station name changes. Lynn, are you there?
I am here, Mr. Chairman. Can you see me and hear me?
I can do neither. I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Sorry,
I'm sure you're somewhere in my Hollywood Squares group here, but I don't quite see you at the present time.
I am, but I think you're seeing my presentation at this point. And so
Yes, please go forward.
as long as the host allows my presentation, that's the more important thing. So this morning we are going to be seeking the board's consideration for requests from the jurisdictions to rename Tyson's Corner Station to Tyson's and Prince George's Plaza Station to Hyattsville Crossing. A little background about the board's policy on such requests. The board adopted its now current policy about 8 years ago. It did so to ensure that changes to station names didn't create an undue cost burden to the system, and to ensure that we would get regional public input to keep the system consistent and to achieve our objective of having station names that provide primarily a wayfinding function for our customers. So on the next slide, you'll see that the board set forth in its policy some criteria that in addition to wayfinding, allows the stations to provide a sense of place and allows the jurisdiction to propose changes to the names. But first they must do public outreach locally and then make their formal requests to Metro to do regional research to ensure that the entirety of the ridership and the public has an opportunity to comment. And so today, as we look at the next slide, you see that the proposed station names would affect our customers on the silver line, as well as on the yellow and green line by the map. And on the next slide, you will see that in addition to the formal submissions from the jurisdictions, we had more than 5,500 people participate in our regional survey about the station names. Clearly, you'll see on the next slide, most preferred the current station names. But when we dig into that data, we see that there's something of a familiarity bias that's playing out with respect to our stations. Tyson's, in the case of Tyson's, dropping the corner is unlikely to be confusing to riders, yet it scores 31 points lower on preference and 34 points lower on relevance, which suggests some resistance to change among customers who are counting on those station names. In the case of Prince George's Plaza, the current name is preferred by only half the riders. But the relevance score is soft because the name has lost its association with the retail plaza for which the station was originally, associated across the street. It's clear from the comments that we received in the surveys that people are hesitant to embrace Hyattsville Crossing because it's not yet a meaningful location name to them, as it's future
Lynn, we're losing you a little bit there. You're going in and out.
Development.
Could you just repeat that, Lynn? You were out for about 7 to 10 seconds in your presentation.
Yes, sir. So I'll just summarize by saying that it's clear that in the case of Prince George's Plaza, Hyattsville Crossing lacks a familiarity for people because it's not yet a location, a destination. And so on the final slide, you'll see that despite the public's preference for the current station names, the staff is prepared to recommend supporting the jurisdiction's requests because they're both associated with transit-oriented development that is in place and progressing. And doing these changes would allow us to align our station names with the communities, the sense of place that they're trying to construct. We believe that over time, our riders will find these names more directionally appealing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll gladly answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. In order to get the discussion started, we'll first need a motion. So I'd like to ask for a motion from a committee member to approve the proposed station name changes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, and there was a second I heard. Thank you. And so now we have a motion before us and we're open to discussion. Preliminarily, I just want to note for the record that there's two pieces of correspondence that we are including in the record regarding the Prince George's Plaza station name change. One is from the Prince George's County Executive, Angela Alsobrooks, in support of the change. And the other is from Council Member Denny Taveras of the Prince George's County Council, who expressed some concerns about the community input that was conducted and the lack of information in the solicitation by WMATA in Spanish. So with those two pieces of correspondence in the record, I'll ask board members if they have any questions or comments. Mr. Rouse for federal government in today's session.
No questions or comments for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gideby?
My only comment is related to the impact of displacement and gentrification in our region. The reality is transit-oriented development has huge economic benefits regionally and for those who live within a specific community and around our metro system. I think naming is one of those challenges when you start to talk about the cultural displacement and the natural tendency for us to know what we've always known. And while a portion of me stands ready to abstain from this vote given some of the issues that have been raised, I also just want to bring in the reality that it is a jurisdictional decision point, and I want to be able to allow for those who are within the community and the leadership that has been elected to be the voices as it relates to what they see as a priority for how we think about what we name our transit stops along our metro system. And it's with that I will be taking my vote, recognizing that there is not general consensus of strong approval, and then also recognizing the reality that there has been local and regional work happening for decades. And this is particularly around Hyattsville Crossing in comparison to Tyson's. So thank you.
Was there a question there that you wanted staff to respond to?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be supportive of the changes. It's obviously a little disconcerting when public input that we receive back on something like this is not overwhelmingly positive, but it's also not terribly surprising given what Lynn has mentioned. I think the facts that we need to focus on are that in both cases, circumstances on the ground have changed. And so the names that are currently used really are not the best names for those stations. In one case, because the retail situation has changed. And then in the case of the Tyson station, there's really been a strong effort over a number of years to rename the entire area Tyson's, and then focus specifically on the name Tyson's Corner as it relates to the Tyson's Corner Mall. And so in order for consistency's sake, we cannot call, Tyson's Corner Mall and refer to it only as a mall and everything except for Metro. But that's, kind of what has taken place in Fairfax County with the leadership of the Board of Supervisors there. So I think the important things to focus on are that these names are still clear. They do provide wayfinding. They are consistent with our policy in other ways, and so I will support the recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate the county executive support for the renaming of the station, and also note that the council did not take a position, on this particular issue. I understand kind of the results that have taken place. As a native Washingtonian who spent some time in that area, now Prince George's County resident, it is not the same area that I'm familiar with growing up. So I certainly do understand the desire of the county executive to make this change. And that's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meridian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions or comments.
Chair Smedberg?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board, members of the committee. If there are no further questions or comments, I'd like to call for a vote on this item, pointing out for all members of the committee as well as board members that if there is a approval in committee, this item will then be acted on or placed for action by the full board meeting, which will follow the string of committee meetings this morning. So I'll ask the board's corporate secretary to take a roll call vote on this on the name change at this time.
Thank you. Chair Goldman?
Aye.
Alternate Director Rouse?
Aye.
Director Gideby?
Aye.
And Director Letourneau?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That'll move that motion for action by the full board at the meeting following the committee meetings this morning. So we'll take up now the other matter of business before the committee this morning. Ms. Impastato, are you ready for your presentation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This morning, I would like to present our progress on outstanding safety items stemming from findings and recommendations issued by state safety oversight agencies and the National Transportation Safety Board. A corrective action plan is a plan developed by WMATA that describes the actions it will take to minimize, control, correct, or eliminate risks and hazards, as well as the schedule for taking those actions. There are three main corrective action plan status categories. In development or implementing means that the corrective action plan's actionable item has been approved by the state safety oversight, meaning that if implemented, it will mitigate the hazard identified. These corrective action plans are in the process of being implemented. Of note, the NTSB does not officially approve of actionable items prior to implementation, but is available for consultation as needed. Submitted for closure means that the corrective action plan has been fully implemented and that supporting documentation and auditing material demonstrate a sustainable implementation and has been submitted to the regulatory agency for closure, and WMATA is awaiting their response. Closed means that the regulatory agency has received all applicable documentation, conducted follow-up audits as needed, and has determined that WMATA has mitigated the hazard in a sustainable and complete manner. All corrective action plans have been posted to WMATA's publicly facing website since July of 2017. These corrective action plans are updated weekly based upon recent closure approvals from the WMSC or issuance of recent findings that require corrective action plans. There have been 367 corrective action plans developed by WMATA in response to findings, recommendations, or required actions issued by the WMSC or the NTSB. The CAPs can be divided into two separate groups, one pertaining to state safety oversight CAPs, and the second to be those CAPs that are in response to NTSB required actions. 305 of the 367 corrective action plans have been closed in the past 4 years. Substantial progress has been made as nearly 20% of all CAP closures, which amounts to 71 corrective action plans, have been closed since I last briefed the board in December of 2019. The corrective action plan closures have contributed to the progress of improving areas such as preventive and corrective maintenance, policy and procedures, training, and record keeping. Corrective action plans that will result in the recent ROC WMSC report are not included in this briefing to the board. WMATA has received comments from the WMSC, and our operational departments are working with the WMSC to ensure that the submitted corrective action plans meet their requirements. This slide demonstrates the status of each corrective action plan organized by the year in which approval was received in the case of a state safety oversight finding, or the year the finding was received in the event of an NTSB recommendation. Many of the older open CAPs have been implemented. However, auditing to ensure that the actions are sustainable, as well as quality assurance activities, are the final parts of the corrective action plan. Upon that demonstration, it will move the corrective action plan from being developed to submitted for closure. Older corrective action plans do not translate to inaction by WMATA. Several require studies and engineering designs, which take time to create. The graph on the right of this slide depicts the hazard ranking of each open corrective action plan. There are 3 open findings that, if unmitigated, would have an unacceptable hazard rating. The first finding is emergency ventilation fan operation training. The second finding is a duplicated finding, which is to implement technology to notify train operators when trains are approaching work areas. WMATA has taken interim measures, including enacting administrative controls and enhancing our training programs to reduce the risks of these hazards to an acceptable level as we work to implement the full solution. Actionable items are attached to each corrective action plan that demonstrate how WMATA will close out the actions. These actions address the conditions that warranted the corrective action plan. Of the current 1,513 actionable items, 1,283 have been approved and closed, 105 have been submitted for approval and closure, and the remaining 125 are in development. A single action may be equivalent to closing a finding in which WMATA developed an overall corrective action plan. However, the majority of the corrective action plans have numerous actionable items that address the specific finding or recommendation. To address these actionable items, WMATA must implement the solutions and submit documentation to the SSO for their closure approval. The number of actionable items will change over time as they are closed on a rolling basis by our state safety oversight, and new ones may be added as we review the progress of implementation. Regarding NTSB recommendations, 6 corrective action plans have been developed and are currently being implemented. Many of these corrective action plans are constrained by available technologies and require significant investment in engineering, design, and capital programs. Of note, many of the NTSB recommendations have been fully addressed and the corrective action plans have been closed. Our primary focus is in making required improvements to the system to ensure the safety of our employees and customers. Corrective action plans are being continuously addressed, and we are currently awaiting response from our State Safety Oversight and the National Transportation Safety Board on 109 submitted action items that address 17 corrective action plans. We continue to work closely with our State Safety Oversight and the National Transportation Safety Board to complete actionable items by agreed upon scheduled dates as noted in the corrective action plans. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to address any questions from the board.
Thank you again, Ms. Impastato, for that update on the CAPS. Unlike the last issue dealing with station naming rights, no action is required by the committee on this. This is an information item, so that we'll now open it up to questions from members of the committee and other board members. To get it started, Ms. Impastato, let me just ask you a question, and let me just focus on the slide 5. caps by source, just as a point of focus. Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up a little more on the last bullet, which deals with the ROC report from the Washington Metropolitan Safety Commission and the caps that were required as a result of that report. You pointed out that I guess the Metro Rail Safety Commission rejected the caps that we brought forward to them, I guess a week or 10 days ago. And from the press reports, my understanding is that the concern of the Safety Commission was that there was a lack of benchmarks in the caps, as well as they felt that there was insufficient attention paid to follow-up strategies. Could you just provide a little more detail of what you actually heard from the Safety Commission as to how they want those caps revised and what action staff is taking to bring them in line to the Safety Commission's and reflect the Safety Commission's concerns, and when those caps might be back in front of the Safety Commission again?
Certainly. So we received comments on the 6th of November from the WMSC. I'd like to note that throughout the development of our corrective action plans, WMATA is engaged proactively with our state safety oversight to review the actions that we intend to take to address the concerns, findings, and issues that they've identified. We will be resubmitting our corrective action plans on the 20th of November. The changes that will be made to the corrective action plans are not in the specific actions that we are taking to address concerns, findings, and issues. It's in adding additional detail as well as refining some of the milestones within our scheduling associated with the corrective action plan action items.
Thank you. And I just have one question on slide 7 on the hazard rankings. If you could, there we go. If you could just explain what makes in this ranking system something unacceptable as opposed to just undesirable from a safety hazard ranking point of view.
Absolutely, my pleasure. When we rank hazards, we rank unmitigated hazards, meaning hazards that exist with absolutely no protective provisions in place. The ranking is a combination of the frequency with which you would expect exposure to the hazard to occur and the severity of an incident in the event that the risk was realized. The combination of frequency and severity results in an alphanumeric classification. The classification is in accordance with industry best practice and Department of Defense Military Standard 882. Hazards that are unmitigated, that have a high frequency potential and a high consequence potential, fall into the unacceptable category, meaning that they must be mitigated to reduce the likelihood of an incident or to reduce the severity of the incident in order for your operation to continue. The 3 hazards that are noted here, to be more specific, are actually 2 hazards, which we've taken action to mitigate down to the undesirable level. Undesirable hazards, from an unmitigated perspective, represent hazards that have a lower likelihood of occurring throughout the operation of the system, or a lower severity in terms of the consequence of their outcomes should those hazards occur. Therefore, they're deemed as undesirable, but do not require complete mitigation to a lower level in order to continue operations and service.
And so because Metro has taken some mitigation steps concerning these 2 so-called unacceptable hazards, as Chief Safety Officer, your opinion is it's safe to operate the trains with these hazards unresolved, and that riders should not feel that they're in any danger in the operation of the Metro Rail system with these hazards still unresolved.
We've taken numerous action items under consideration and implementation to address these hazards. With regard to the ventilation operations, we have an extensive training program. We've revised our playbooks, and we've began to conduct skills drills with our employees. We've also enhanced the robustness of our supervisory oversight of the operation of ventilation fans. With regard to technology for roadway worker protection, we have participated in research and development projects to test the technologies that are currently available in the market. We have not found a commercial product that meets our needs with regard to reliability for a system-wide deployment. We've enacted administrative controls to protect our employees when they are working alongside the alignment. Those administrative controls offer an acceptable level of risk reduction. However, we are ultimately pursuing a more effective, more reliable, more robust technological solution.
And in that regard, are there some technological solutions that are on the horizon that we've looked at that could be piloted or that you expect to be used in the next 24 to 36 months so that we can close this cap and this project out?
So we are currently piloting one technology solution as part of a grant from the Federal Transit Administration. We're evaluating the results of that pilot. There are other commercial suppliers on the market. The market is regularly being influenced by evolutions in technology, and we are continuing to study that. I can't say with certainty that we'll have a fully deployed solution over the course of the next 24 to 36 months, but I can say with a high degree of confidence and comfort that we will have evaluated new and emerging solutions to identify opportunities to deploy and or pilot new technology.
Thank you very much. It's hopeful that we move along and get these issues resolved as quickly as possible, since these have been on the cap deck for many years at this point. Mr. Rouse, questions?
Mr. Chair, he had a conflict, so he had to leave the meeting.
Oh, okay. Ms. Gideby?
No questions or comments at this time. Thank you for the update.
Mr. Letourneau?
Same here. No questions. Thank you.
All right. That completes the questions from committee members. We'll move on to other board members. Mr. Graham?
No questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
Mr. McMillan?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Meridian?
No questions, thank you.
Chair Smedberg?
No questions. Teresa, thank you for all your work as always. Appreciate it.
Ms. Ellison, do we expect Mr. Rouse to return to the meeting, or we should assume that he won't be joining us for any more of this meeting?
You will not be joining for the rest of this meeting. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, that then completes business before the Safety and Operations Committee this morning. I thank Ms. Impastato, Ms. Bowersox, and others for their efforts and their participation. And I will return the meeting to, I guess, Chair Smedberg and the Executive Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Everyone, and welcome to the Executive Committee meeting of the WMATA Board on November 19th. My name is Paul Smedberg, Chair of the Board. Our first order of business this morning is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? You have them before you. Any questions or comments on those sets of minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have two items on today's agenda. The first is the acceptance of a report from the Inspector General. The second is an update on Metro's sustainability initiatives and the zero emission bus program as part of the board's framework for transit equity. The presentation will also provide draft sustainability principles for the board to review in advance of their proposed adoption next year. So our first action item is the Inspector General's report. Under the board's bylaws, the executive committee has the responsibility of reviewing and accepting audits and other reports by the IG. The committee has reviewed the following report: audit of the replacement of WMATA's remote terminal units. Before we take a vote, I'd like to call on Mr. Charrington, the WMATA IG, to provide the committee with a brief overview of his report. Mr. Charrington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is WMATA's Remote Terminal Unit Audit, or RTU. WMATA had not established an overall RTU replacement project or fully integrated and coordinated the activity. WMATA did not complete several critical project life cycle management processes, such as a business needs assessment, risk assessment, and project plan. These conditions occurred because the lack of an enterprise-wide rail modernization plan, of organizational fragmentation, inadequate oversight controls, lack of agreed upon solutions, and not fully following the project management lifecycle processes. The issues raised by the OIG prompted management to conclude the interim IT RTU replacement project was infeasible. This project subsequently was canceled, increasing cost efficiency by putting $62.9 million to better use. Management estimated the need for $39.3 million to complete a repurposed RTU replacement project, leaving $23.6 million in savings for other purposes. We commend WMATA management for taking significant action to adjust the RTU replacement project by canceling the interim IT RTU project. WMATA management generally concurred with the findings and recommendations made by the OIG. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Charrington. I'll open it up to the committee members if there's any committee discussion. Ms. Gideby?
No, I just want to thank the OIG for their leadership, as well as Laura Mason's work on this. You know, when you think about the legacy of this system and how old it is, to maintain it and bring it up to upgrades is a real challenge. And when we think about the safety concerns that were happening around that same era, and the fact that this then became a priority to also figure out a solution, I look forward to us really thinking about how we provide a comprehensive response to meeting the IT challenges and the physical infrastructure challenges for this system, and also making sure that it works safely for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gideby. Mr. Goldman?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to echo what Ms. Gideby said. This is a problem that we face with a legacy rail system that's been out there for 40, 45 years with you know, parts that need to be replaced. So this is the equivalent in replacing these RTUs of going from copper wire to fiber optics, and going from vacuum tubes in a TV to you know, microprocessors and switches of that nature. So these kind of problems and these kind of projects are going to be things that the board is going to have to face in repeated areas and in repeated projects over the next number of years, as you know, parts wear out and their life expires and they need to be replaced to protect the operation of the system and the safety of our riders. Thank you. And thank you for Mr. Charrington for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Goldman, and Mr. IG. Thank you for bringing this to attention, and your team, specifically Rex, for his work on this, and also, as Ms. Gideby said, Laura Mason on the WMATA side for her work on this issue. I'll open it up to others. As we know, Mr. Rouse had to step away for a few moments. I'll open it up to other board members should anyone have any comments or questions. Mr. Marudian?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Graham?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Mr. Letourneau?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. McMillan?
No comments, thank you.
Okay. Acceptance of this audit plan constitutes the board's authorization to post this report or a summary as appropriate on the WMATA website, provided that the Inspector General has conferred with the General Counsel and confirm that any private or confidential information has been removed, redacted in accordance with the applicable law and WMATA policy. In accordance with this procedure, I move that the Executive Committee accept OIG's report, Audit of the Replacement of WMATA's Remote Terminal Units. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Goldman. Now I'll ask Ms. Ellison to call the roll.
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Giddy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Goldman.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ellison. The motion passes. Next, we'll move on to our next item, and this is an information item. It's about sustainability principles, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Webster, who will be leading this. Mr. Webster? Is Tom
Yes,
on?
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, Tom.
Again, my name is Tom Webster, and I'm Metro's Executive Vice President for Strategy, Planning, and Program Management. This morning, our discussion will be around transit equity and sustainability principles. And as Metro's dealing with the difficult decisions on the budget and bus and rail service brought on by the financial losses caused by the pandemic, it's also important to focus on the long-term mission and goals of Metro, and to recognize and build on the powerful impact that transit has on the sustainability of our region, excuse me, on equity, the environment, the regional economy, the health and well-being of our communities, and on economic mobility. Focusing on Metro's value to the region will help Metro and the region recover from the pandemic and position us well for transformational opportunities that may come about. This morning, we'll present a brief recap of Metro's active sustainability programs and initiatives. We will provide a progress update on our zero emission bus program. And as requested by the Executive Committee, we will present a draft sustainability vision statement and sustainability principles for the board's consideration. Back in July, over the summer, the board received updates on Metro's sustainability programs, action plans, initiatives, and projects. Since that time, Metro has continued to advance those efforts, including reaching a milestone in our lighting renewal program, completing LED lighting upgrades at all underground platforms in the system. We have awarded contracts for the design and construction of new lead bus facilities at Northern and Bladensburg. And we have advanced our solar lease program. We also are continuing on our zero emission bus program test and evaluation and planning. Building on the recommendations of the Bus Transformation Project and Metro's Energy Action Plan, Metro is preparing for zero emission bus operations. Zero emission bus offers a transformational opportunity for Metro and the region. Metro operates a fleet of almost 1,600 buses over hundreds of square miles. And while Metro and the broader transit industry have taken important steps over the years to improve the cleanliness of buses, they're not as clean or as efficient as they can be. Zero emission buses could lead to cleaner air, reduced greenhouse gases and localized air pollution, and decrease the use of fossil fuels. Could improve the experience for riders with quieter vehicles and less vibration. And zero emission buses have the potential to reduce long-term operational, fuel, and maintenance costs. Advancing to zero emission bus also faces a number of significant challenges and variables, not all of which are in Metro's direct control, including what is a still maturing electric bus technology, significant coordination required among Metro, the jurisdictions, and the utilities, substantial new capital investment in infrastructure, vehicles, and in facilities. To advance the rollout of zero emission bus at Metro, Metro and the jurisdictions must move ahead with significant actions and investments. At Metro, we are advancing this test and evaluation program for electric buses, through which we will test the maturity of different electric bus technologies in our regional operating environment, and we'll evaluate the requirements for a wider rollout of electric buses. Our partners at the utilities and in the jurisdictions will need to work with us and work together to upgrade the electrical grid to support the operation of electric buses, and some of that work is underway today. Energy rates will need to be established for electric bus charging, similar to the transit rate class we have for the rail system. And importantly, this transformation will need a very large infrastructure and capital investment in the sustainability effort from our partners in the region and at the federal level. That substantial investment will fund the purchase of electric buses, the investment in the upgrade and conversion of our bus facilities, and then charging infrastructure throughout the service area. Metro is aggressively pursuing our steps internally to advance zero emission bus. Earlier this year, we pursued and were awarded a competitive Federal Transit Administration grant from the FTA's Low and No Emission Competitive Grant Program. And combined with the funding from the region, including dedicated funding, it will advance our $25 million test and evaluation program. We're also advancing, as part of that, the purchase of about 12 electric buses to test and to evaluate. We're consulting with our peers across the industry and in the region who have either already started or further along in advancing incremental investments in electric buses, or are beginning pilots, similar to efforts underway at Metro and in the jurisdictions. There's been a lot of work on initial best practice and programmatic approaches to zero emission bus rollout, and we are in close consultation with our peers and with others to ensure a successful program. We're also designing our replacement bus facilities at Northern and Bladensburg bus garages to be ready for electric buses. Moving on, importantly, governments, state and local governments, transit agencies, businesses across the country have adopted legislation, established policies, or business commitments on sustainability. Those policies commonly speak to a variety of issues under the sustainability umbrella, including climate change and climate plans, purchasing requirements, building regulations, electric bus programs, reducing carbon emissions, increasing efficiency and fiscal responsibility, and racial and social equity. In our region, you can see on this slide, all of the jurisdictions, states, local jurisdictions, the counties, and many of our transportation agencies have adopted legislation, established policies, established goals and targets in a variety of areas to advance sustainability and drive sustainability outcomes. For Metro, establishing a formal sustainability vision and principles will provide a framework for sustainability action plans, projects and initiatives that will drive outcomes for our customers, the region, the jurisdictions, and for Metro's own operations, including improved accessibility, affordability, equity, and resilience, and environmental and economic benefits. So to develop the draft sustainability vision and principles for board consideration, our team reviewed the sustainability and related policies of other transit agencies, the state and local governments in our region, and various businesses and other entities in our region and across the country. And we did that with the objective of finding some commonalities in those policies and vision statements as a starting point for the board's consideration and discussion. So our draft vision statement is: Metro provides a sustainable transportation system, a system that meets the needs of people, communities, and businesses in the region, and fosters social well-being, equity, economic prosperity, and environmental stewardship. Our 8 draft sustainability principles, and I'll summarize these rather than read them. Formalizing our approach to sustainability through an action plan, evaluating our investments in light of equity, environmental, and other community impacts, improving livability, protecting the environment, promoting equity and access to opportunity, leveraging our position in the region and in the market to advance regional goals. Making cost-effective and data-driven business decisions, being transparent and collaborative, continuing to push for innovation and continuous improvement, including through partnerships, and measuring and managing our performance. For next steps, staff will incorporate the guidance and feedback from the board in this session and subsequent discussions, and then we'll return to the board with a finalized vision statement and principles for adoption by the board early next year. And then next spring, we will present draft sustainability indicators and targets for the board's consideration, building off of the vision statement and those principles. And then next summer, we'll return with an update on our sustainability action plans and initiatives, including another progress update on the zero emission bus program. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation this morning, and our team looks forward to the committee's discussion of the draft vision and the principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. I have one sort of question before I open it up. I'll take this opportunity to do so first. Tell us what cooperation with the regional partners looks like, because several of them are well underway with a lot of these initiatives. But what does that look like to you and your team? Give us sort of an idea of how you would operationalize your activity there.
So I think importantly, advancing zero emission bus is much more than purchasing buses.
Right.
The actions to upgrade the electrical grid are frankly advanced by the utilities, not by Metro,
right.
And in coordination with the jurisdictions who oversee and regulate those utilities. Our investments in upgrading, replacing, and converting our bus facilities are all subject to coordination with the jurisdictions that those facilities sit in, and cooperation and partnership in advancing those projects and those upgrades is really paramount. And then I think, for a large scale rollout of electric bus, there will need to be charging infrastructure, not just at Metro bus facilities, but also at locations throughout the service area where the buses operate. So there'll be an ongoing need for coordination with the jurisdictions on locating and designing and constructing that infrastructure and equipment. And I think, again, most importantly here, this program comes with potentially huge benefits for the region, but it does come with a large capital investment cost on the front end, and that presents an opportunity for again partnership within the region and with the federal government.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ms. Gideby.
Okay.
Sorry, got you there.
No problem. Well, maybe let me ground my comments by just saying thank you for the opportunity to really have this discussion on sustainability. I want to ground it in the transit equity component, because when we think about who is most impacted by the implications of climate change, it is communities of color that have often bared the burden, both from a public health standpoint and a life expectancy. And so as we really kind of think about how we want to pursue the visions for our region in this next decade, I'm encouraged to see this as one of our priorities. And when I think about the decision that the board made in June to really prioritize transit equity, from the work that happened and being able to really look at the Metro Police Department, to the decisions that we've made in terms of supporting small businesses and disadvantaged businesses in the region and setting aggressive goals despite the pandemic, to just making sure that our bus standards and our work in terms of public involvement continues to reflect the diverse voices of this region. I'm also encouraged to see this plan come forward on sustainability. I want to acknowledge the comments that came through last month, where it's clear that the public is also watching Metro and the work that needs to happen as it relates to sustainability more specifically. And I'd like to go to slide 4, really talking through the benefits and also the challenges that are required, especially as we think about what it means to turn over our fleet. Transportation has become the dirtiest sector as it relates to the impact of pollution and greenhouse gas nationally. And I think that there is an inherent responsibility for us to really think about both the benefits and also who is most burdened when we don't address these issues more specifically. And so as I hear about the cost and the upfront cost that is required in terms of the capital investment to be able to both modernize our fleet, but also ensure that it's no longer causing harm, I'm also thinking about the long-term benefits for the region. I also want to go to more specifically the regional framework on slide 8 specifically. And it's clear that all of the jurisdictions, Maryland, Virginia, and the district, have set some very aggressive goals for what they expect in terms of both sustainability and clean energy. And if anything, it seems like WMATA has not necessarily come along in the journey and making sure that we set some really also comparable aggressive standards and targets. And so I am hoping that, Tom, you can, in the next iteration of this plan that you'll be bringing towards us for next steps, that the principles as drafted and the targets and the indicators that we set that are identified in slide 13 will really meet where the region is. I don't think the concern is really around where the region is. There have been some very bold policies that have been set, both at the state level, the local level, even at the county levels, but it's really also just making sure that WMATA is doing its part. And I recognize that as we're also having conversations around the budget implications, I hope that we will take some of these factors into play as we go into 2022 and beyond. And I also just want to thank the general manager with everything that is happening for WMATA in this time. The fact that we also are still pursuing an aggressive long-term vision for this system to work for all of us and also our environment is critical. So I don't have questions. I just wanted to make sure that I was elevating up some of the key findings of the framework as it's been presented to the board. I hope that the board members will actively support us really having an aggressive sustainability plan that really not just meets the regional goals, but also where we're moving forward to as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Goldman? I think you're on mute, Michael.
Thank you. Technical difficulties. When we considered the bus transformation study, the board's resolution emphasized that one of its priorities was moving to an all-electric bus fleet as a board priority. And I think while the language of the presentation today and the vision statement is a good one, it really lacks kind of teeth. It really lacks a kind of a target and a goal as to when we will get there. As the presentation refers, the surrounding jurisdictions, Montgomery County in particular, has a goal of carbon neutrality by 2035. And the county's ride-on system is buying electric buses. And that's happening in the district as well with the DC circulator, which is moving to an all-electric bus fleet. And so, I think there's a concern here that Metro is not doing its part, and we should be a leader in this area as moving to zero emissions, all-electric fleet as soon as we can. And we're doing this not just because it's the good government thing to do, not just because it provides for clean air, but as your slides indicated, in the long term, this provides for savings in terms of operating costs for the authority as well. Yes, I recognize that initial costs in terms of bus purchases are a little higher, but the evidence as shown in your slides, as well as what we've seen nationally from other agencies, is in the long term, this produces operating benefits in terms of lower energy costs and lower maintenance costs. So I guess, Tom, what I want to do is to encourage you to be more aggressive in this. And when you come back to the board with your vision statement, to have something in there in terms of a target that we're shooting for. Maybe it should be that the Metro bus fleet will be 50% all electric by 2030 and 100% by 2035. But I think it's something like that that we really need to, as an organization, show that we're committed to this goal and that we've got a long-term plan that we're going to meet and that we're going to dedicate our long-term resources in our capital budget to meeting that goal as well. I recognize that turning over 1,600 buses is not something that can be done in a year or 2 years, but it strikes me that it's something that we should be able to do or get a good way to there in 10 to 15 years if we're dedicated to the policy in terms of board direction and in terms of staff commitment. So my bottom line summary is good language, but let's come back with something when you come back with a vision statement that has an actual timetable and a targeted goal of how we're going to get to an all-electric bus fleet at Metro. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this presentation and I appreciate the discussion we're having. I think it's a good one. It's one we should have. It's one that the entire fleet is eventually moving towards potentially. I do have some questions though that might help give some context. So what is the status of the efforts to add CNG buses to the fleet, which we have seen significant emissions reductions from?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Letourneau. Right now, the Metro bus fleet is made up of CNG, hybrid, and diesel buses. And the existing fleet plan calls for roughly a balance between CNG and diesel going forward. That plan is as part of our zero emission bus update being evaluated and will be updated. So there are CNG buses operated out of 2 of our facilities today, with a 3rd expected to come online within the next couple of years.
Do we have plans to add more?
Our existing plan is to balance the fleet to be about 50% CNG.
Yeah, but are we at that 50%?
I will have to get back to you on the exact number, but we've been operating towards that number.
Okay. I mean, I think it's important, we don't want to just set goals and then move on to the next goal. I think we want to achieve what we've already set forward in this area. And one of the reasons I bring it up is because this is really a discussion a lot larger than us. Electricity is fine, but the question is, what's the source of that electricity? Ultimately, the source of a lot of electricity in this region, and particularly if we're going to see significant expansion, is going to be natural gas. So it, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense to convert to electric buses that will be running on electricity coming from natural gas, and then not necessarily invest in actual CNG buses and then act like we've really done something, because we haven't. We've just changed who the users are of the same fuel source. So there's a lot to this. Obviously, it depends on where our utilities are. Obviously, many of the utilities themselves have set goals, 2030, 2040, 2050, in terms of where they want their electricity source to come from. But that matters a great deal when we look at the total life cycle emissions of our fleet. And the reality is, even when they do go to hopefully more solar and wind, they're still going to need backup generation. And we have to have backup generation for our buses. One of the concerns here is our needs are going to be very specific at specific times. And so one of the reasons why electricity works so well for private fleets is because people can come home and plug in and charge their vehicles overnight when there's not a lot of demand for electricity elsewhere going on. In our case, we're not necessarily going to have that luxury. We can certainly do it overnight, but we have buses running at almost all hours of the day, and we're going to have to charge during peak hour as well, which is going to be A, expensive, and B, going to have some issues in terms of availability. So it's fine to set goals and targets, but we have to really understand the whole picture of what we're doing. I would like more information about the current fleet and exactly whether we're going to meet what we've already set forth as some of our goals. The bus transformation study, I was actually looking at the language. It didn't commit to anything specifically. It said that we should test and evaluate zero emission, including electric buses, to add to the bus fleet. That's all it said. And I agree with that. We should. So I'm supportive of this, and I'm supportive of this effort. And obviously, that's where all the jurisdictions are going. It's where the utilities are going. But it's something that I think we need a lot more information about on the back end before we can figure out what will make sense for us in terms of what we can do. Not to mention, obviously, we're not going to be in this pandemic situation forever, but the amount of infrastructure investment needed here is going to be enormous. And it's something that we need our regional partners to completely buy into. And I think ultimately they probably will, but we'll have to plan that out pretty carefully. But thank you very much for this information.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Mr. Meridian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Echoing the thanks, Tom, for this presentation and for the amount of work I know you've been putting into it. I do have a couple questions. Can you talk a little bit with some specificity about what design readiness at Northern and Bladensburg looks like? What are the steps that are being taken that otherwise would not have been if we weren't constructing a design ready facility?
Sure. So our intent and what we're pursuing at both Northern and Bladensburg is essentially making the buildings, designing the buildings and then constructing the buildings to house future charging equipment. We're building in things like conduit to support charging stations for buses as they're in the station or as they're in the facility, things along those lines. And then as we're advancing the test and evaluation program and identifying those equipment needs, the resolving some of the operational and technology interoperability challenges, then moving to install those that charging infrastructure within the facility itself.
Thanks. And is it fair to assume that there's a significant cost associated with that as opposed to just not including it?
There certainly is an incremental additional cost at each facility for the installation of that. So the initial effort is essentially to fit out the facility, and then there'll be an incremental cost for the charging infrastructure. Got it. Can you speak a little bit towards the procurement of electric buses themselves, and what some of the challenges might be there as opposed to diesel vehicles, or just any general thoughts about the procurement and what some of the constraints and challenges you might face as we look to transfer this fleet to all electric? So as compared to the more established bus fuel types, most manufacturers in the electric bus space are still maturing their technology. So what we intend to do as part of the test and evaluation is acquire different types of buses from different types of or different manufacturers to test and evaluate those again in our operating environment. Well, what we have learned and are continuing to learn from some of our peers across the country are those challenges of a new and emerging and maturing technology. So the appropriate thing to do here is procure from a programmatic standpoint a small number of buses, establish what our requirements and needs are as we move towards a larger rollout. Thanks. I can appreciate that. And as Mr. Goldman alluded to, we are in the process now of converting the DC circulator fleet to all electric, obviously a much smaller fleet. And so I'm keenly aware of the challenges and the constraints, and appreciate the hard work that you're putting into this. And I'll just echo my colleague, Ms. Gideby, that we've heard from a number of residents and members of the community who are eager to see our fleet become all electric. I share in that eagerness and that sense of urgency, and appreciate the amount of work that will go into that. And we as a city are committed to partnering, to doing our part. And I look forward to that partnership and appreciate the steps you've taken to date. So thank you. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maruti, and Mr. Graham.
Thank you. So I'll preface my comments as a reminder that I no longer represent PEPCO, but I did have a 30-year career in the electric utility industry. Tom, thank you for this. It's been very insightful. I appreciate all the work you've done in this area. I actually grew up in running energy efficiency programs and doing sustainability work within the company. I heard earlier that you've been in contact with your peers about a lot of this. So kind of based on that, would you say that you're at the forefront, kind of in the middle, or kind of still developing in the sustainability space in relation to our peers?
I think in the larger sustainability space, we're probably somewhere in the middle at Metro. I think we have advanced some very meaningful initiatives and projects under the umbrella of sustainability, and made some real meaningful changes. I think in terms of a vision, policy principles, and sort of a larger framework, we are behind others in the industry and in other industries, in that we don't have a formal established vision, principles, and goals.
Okay, thank you. So I would say that the pilot approach is a good approach. Battery technology is still evolving, so we have to be careful about jumping in too quickly before the technology is at a very, very mature point. I agree with the comments from Mr. Goldman regarding a long-term vision and having specific goals. If it's not measured, nothing really kind of takes place at the pace that it should take place. So I agree that it would be good to see some teeth behind the vision in the direction that we're going. It's just really, it's difficult having this conversation because I also know, what the capital commitment is with regards to moving in this direction after just having our discussion about budget. So I look at this as more as, a phased approach and looking at the reimagining of transportation and reimagining of WMATA in the space of sustainability. And I believe, let me just go down my list quickly. And I believe that concludes my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Mr. McMillan.
Nothing from me at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom, appreciate the work on this. I think it's fair to say that this is a very good first start, and advancing this issue, and it should be something that's a part of anything sustainable moving in the future with anything we do at Metro is something that we should be focused on. So as it relates to the environment and equity and advancement of these goals. So appreciate that. Mr. Wiedefeld or Mr. Webster, any final comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Wiedefeld. Again, I obviously want to thank Tom and the effort he's been doing here. In terms of the electric buses and moving in that direction, I think we should develop a specific goal. I think that we have that effort underway. I think if we can get a little bit more of the understanding of what that is, I would prefer to have a goal that we can hit versus, and then make it aspirational on top of that. But I don't think it's good to put one out there that we really can't, if we don't know enough to get towards it. So we will look at that very closely when we come back to the board.
Yeah, and I think the regional cooperation is going to be key to a lot of that as well. So, all right, thank you very much. With no further business to come before the committee, we will stand adjourned. The Board of Directors meeting will begin shortly, so please stay tuned. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November 19th, 2020 WMATA board meeting. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to ask the corporate board secretary, Ms. Ellison, to call the roll. Ms. Ellison.
Thank you. Chair Smedberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Gideby,
Present.
Vice Chair Goldman,
Present.
Director Horner,
Present.
Director Letourneau,
Present.
Alternate Director Meridian,
Present.
Alternate Director Graham,
Present.
Director McMillan.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Our first order of business is approval of an agenda. Now we have the agenda before us. If there are no objections, I'd like to consider the agenda approved as presented. Does anyone have any objections or comments on the agenda? If not, the agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval: the October 22nd board meeting, the October 22nd executive session, and the November 5th executive session. I'd like to move approval of these minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Gideby. Any comments or questions on those? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to public comment and the reports from our advisory bodies. First, we'll hear from customers and stakeholders who submitted comments for the board. Then we'll hear from the Accessibility Advisory Committee Chair, Philip Posner, followed by the Riders Advisory Council Chair, Andrew Carrig. Dan, would you please roll the comments and the videos?
Public comment number 1. From Joanne Barton of Montgomery County. Can you establish a route to take caregivers from Glenmont Station to BG Retirement Village and back again? Workers have to own an auto to get to and from work. Thank you for your consideration. Please call me with results. JRB.
Public comment number 2, from Joshua Hertzberg of Washington, D.C. Hi. As a neighbor of the Northern Bus Garage, I am still deeply dissatisfied with the narrow-minded approach that you are taking in your renovation plans. We need clean air and affordable housing in our city, and you are working on neither. This facility should be an electric bus facility with housing or affordable housing built above it. If you want to get really creative, you can set aside housing for bus operators so they can live near where they work. The managers of this project have not considered an appropriate set of alternatives and is being arbitrary and capricious in moving ahead with their plans without appropriate consideration of the impacts to the neighborhood. It would be much better for WMATA to lead than to need to be dragged into a better answer. Thank you. Public comment number 3, from Calvin Swanigan of Alexandria, Virginia. My comment is, the officers need better training, socially and emotionally. There are a lot of good staff with Metro, but what about these bad seeds we come across? What do we do? How do we act when our children are being derailed by some of the people? What about the true criminals? Why are we being silenced to only speak and say what's good for WMATA? Why are we not being answered? Truth will come to light. Public comment number 4, from Michael Wellen of Washington, D.C. I like the name Tyson's Corner. It is a good geographic descriptor because the station is close to the intersection of Route 7 and Route 123, the corner part of the name. It is also next to the Tyson's Corner Center and connected to it by a sky bridge. For these reasons, the station name describes the area it serves accurately. Finally, the station is at the heart of the Tysons. More than the other stations in Tysons, it is the central station for the area. The name, Tyson's Corner, is evocative of this central, bustling location. This new name does not make any sense. There are 4 metro stations in Tysons. Why should only one of them be named as if it serves the whole area? This would be like renaming Metro Center to Downtown DC. It's true that Metro Center is in downtown DC, but there are several other stations in that neighborhood, and it wouldn't make sense to give just one station the name for the whole area. Similarly, there are parts of Tysons that are better served by the McLean, Greensboro, and Spring Hill stations. It makes no sense to imply that Tysons Corner is the best station to reach all parts of Tysons, which is what you would be doing if you adopted this new name. Metro already has a problem where tourists think the Smithsonian Station is the best one for all Smithsonian museums, even though several of them are closer to Archives or Federal Triangle. Does WMATA really want to create another situation like that in Tysons? Prince George's Plaza has the benefit of being a long-established name, so people around the area know where it is, even though the shopping mall there no longer shares a name with the station. I also think the name just sounds nice. This name leaves much to be desired. It is technically accurate because the station is located near a major crossroads in Hyattsville, but that's the only thing it has going for it. First, there is already a station that has Hyattsville in the name. As somebody who has accidentally taken the Metro to East Falls Church when I actually needed to go to West Falls Church, I think that WMATA should avoid duplicating parts of station names as much as possible. Second, I worry that Hyattsville Crossing implies that this is the central hub of Hyattsville, i.e., downtown. In reality, the station is quite far from downtown Hyattsville. I can imagine passengers getting off here thinking they could walk to the shops and restaurants on Rhode Island Avenue when in fact it is too far to walk. In summary, it might make sense to change the name, Prince George's Plaza, since the shopping mall was renamed, but Hyattsville Crossing misses the mark and would be worse than the current name. I would suggest doing a survey where people who live in the area can suggest a new name that is more accurate.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our public comments for today. Thank you.
Good morning. November has been an interesting month for WMATA and the DMV and the country. The AAC and its bus, rail, and metro access groups have been listening to the public and WMATA staff about several issues. We appreciate Chairman Smedberg attending our October AAC meeting and participating throughout in our sessions on the budget, railcar sanitizing, and ridership issues. We look forward to meeting with other board members and Mr. Wiedefeld at future meetings. This month, we continue to hear from riders and the committee members about issues involving budget, bus rail, metro access, as well as the need for usability as well as accessibility standards in various WMATA areas. We've also spent a good portion of time discussing the new metro access sedans. 2 of them have been delivered and have been piloted with a few customers and AAC members. And I'll present more information about that a little bit later. Ms. Williams-Hall gave the AAC a brief progress report on the project to improve metro access scheduling and dispatch software. And we're looking forward to that proceeding at a good pace, which it appears to be doing. The AAC developed a process for moving forward with the 2020 Hedinger Awards during the pandemic and reduced availability of WMATA headquarters, and we will keep you updated as that moves forward. Following the presentation by Bran Loney, the Director of Railcar Maintenance, on sanitizing and cleaning of the cars, the committee and public asked questions and made suggestions about procedures that might relieve some of the COVID fears that have led to reduced ridership. Among the issues discussed were the need for better distribution of hand sanitizer on the bus and rail systems, as well as location and accessibility of these stations. The issue of mass distribution and requirements for riders was also discussed. Air quality and filtration were major issues that concern customers for both bus and rail travel. Some systems like New York and San Francisco are piloting air filters in their vehicles, but there was still a question of cost effectiveness and local air quality around individuals not wearing masks and in the underground stations and on platforms. So we will continue to follow this, and we know you are doing a wonderful job of doing the best that you can on making the system safe. Mr. Blake, the Managing Director for Access Services, reported that the first 2 of the 177 Metro Access sedans have been delivered. Once all the vehicles arrive, the sedans will be approximately 30% of the Metro Access fleet. The solicitation criteria for purchasing these sedans was developed with the help of feedback received from the AAC and the disability community at large. The criteria that was requested from the group included standards for legroom, front and rear, headroom, front and rear, and vehicle access usability. The primary interest for WMATA in a hybrid vehicle was a desire for good fuel efficiency. The AAC was told that a competitive solicitation resulted in the Toyota Camry hybrid being purchased. Unfortunately, these vehicles appear to have been purchased while ignoring the advice of the AAC, the ADAP, as well as the posted WMATA RFP requirements listed on pages 81 to 84 of that RFP. These included exterior sedan color, mileage requirements, and most importantly, which they did ignore, was the request that sedans must have at least 90-degree door opening angle for easy entry and exit. The last critical item was ignored in awarding the contract to Toyota. The 90-degree door opening is essential for wheelchair patrons to transfer to the vehicle. It is also important for large mobility challenged individuals to be able to have access. This item was requested by the AAC and ADAP based upon experience and lessons learned from previous purchases, which were not accessible to certain members of the disability community. It is tragic that a large segment of the Metro Access customer base will not be able to use these sedans, which will comprise 30% of the fleet. We believe that it is important for the board, the general manager, and the inspector general to learn why the final procurement process appears to have ignored the expert advice and best practices provided through the AAC and deviated from the listed RFP requirements for accessibility and usability. Mr. Blake informed the committee that the 2 already procured sedans will continue to be used for customer trips until January 2021 in order to receive comments from customers and the operators. The feedback received from the trips taken thus far has been only partially positive due to the less than 90-degree door opening of the Camry. Mr. Blake added that in the future, customers will be encouraged to express their vehicle preference when booking trips, since many will be unable to transfer from mobility devices to the Camry. The AAC looks forward to having the allotted number of Toyota Camrys within the Metro Access fleet, but would have preferred that a more disability-friendly, usable vehicle that met the standards of the RFP had been chosen. Thank you for your attention and happy to answer any questions. And I know I'm not live, but you have my email and my phone number. Have a great rest of the day.
Smedberg and members of the board, it's my privilege and pleasure to be able to address you all with an update on the activities of the Riders Advisory Council during November. My colleagues and I had the pleasure of meeting with James Pizzero, co-developer and co-founder of the DC Metro Hero app, which some of you all might be familiar with already. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Metro Hero app provides a way for Metro rail riders to track their train's position and the position of trains across the network in real time. Metro Hero also last year, as part of their work using WMATA's own real-time transit data, developed a report card in conjunction with the Coalition for Smarter Growth. The Metrobus report card awarded the performance of the priority corridor bus network within the district an overall grade of D, and laid out numerous suggestions, both operational and infrastructure, that DDOT and WMATA could undertake to improve overall bus performance in the district. In conjunction with last year's bus transformation project, it's a meaningful step forward to better understand ways that we can improve bus performance. As an outgrowth of that, Metro Hero recently developed a new tool called the Adherence, Reliability, and Integrity Evaluation System, or ARIES. ARIES is a dashboard that can compare routes across the region from a variety of operators. WMATA, of course, Arlington Regional Transit, Fairfax County Bus, or Montgomery County Transit, amongst others. It also includes, of course, services in Baltimore, such as, including the MTA's local bus services. This is a powerful toolkit, and the ability to measure the overall performance of individual routes at such a wide variety of transit systems is a meaningful step forward for understanding the overall performance of buses in the region. Just as with the bus transformation project or the Metro Bus report card, it can provide new insights on ways that we can further improve the general performance of these networks. And I hope that you all will find it a meaningful tool as well for better understanding these issues. Because ARIES metrics are based on the real-time data that WMATA makes available through a number of different software APIs, or application programming interfaces, it also highlights the need for WMATA to improve the overall quality of real-time data available to bus riders. The data that ARIES is using is the same data that goes to apps like Transit or Citymapper, that goes into Apple Maps or Google Maps. And this data is often, at least on buses, is often incomplete. It might sometimes not be updated for tens of minutes at a time, or might just be missing overall. There might be things like ghost buses, which are buses that are theoretically coming and are reported as coming based on schedule or even real-time data, but that never show up, as if they were ghosts, because these buses were not actually dispatched. As you all no doubt recall, real-time bus transit information can be a way for riders to understand their best choices when choosing transit to make trips that otherwise might be made by car. And improvement of the data that Metrobus is able to provide would not just be an improvement for riders or for understanding performance issues, but just generally a step forward in furthering the overall growth of Metrobus ridership when the pandemic is over. Apropos the pandemic, I should report that a number of riders have raised concerns about the withdrawal by Metro of the masks that had been, until very recently, publicly available at station manager kiosks. As you all no doubt remember from last month's report, the masks that, following that board meeting, were made available, the disposable blue surgical masks, had apparently been popular. And if particular individuals were taking one or two more than they needed, then it highlights nothing more than the lack of availability of masks for those who might not have the money to buy one themselves. And in conjunction with the region's governments, we hope that WMATA will work to make masks more widely available, not just on transit, but generally. I should also mention that the hand sanitizing stations, which have been set up in at least most Metro Rail stations, many riders have concerns that they are often off to the side or in corners, that they are not visible, and so we would urge WMATA to, at the very minimum, include some sort of signage indicating where these stations are. As concerns the budget revisions that you all will be voting on at today's meeting, we are, of course, grateful that WMATA has been able to avoid the most painful service cuts, those that would impact very deeply folks who rely on WMATA to get to jobs that can't be done from home. Those of us who do work from home or that have the option of working from home during this extraordinary time should, of course, be grateful for those who do not, more now than ever. And after speaking with a number of those folks, including, for example, one of the cashiers that I've gotten to know over the past couple of months at my grocery store, they are, the fact that more serious cuts, including hours of service cuts, have been avoided, has not gone unnoticed. And we hope that things that will continue to be postponed, for example, the changing the price of the regional bus pass from $15 to $12, or the increase in the Metro Rail to Metro Bus, or vice versa, transfer discount will be only postponed and not canceled. And that at the first available opportunity, the board does restore those initiatives so that we might further improve bus ridership. Want to thank you all and wish you all a very happy and healthy Thanksgiving. Please do continue to stay well and stay safe. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone who sent in remarks and to our advisory body chairs for their reports. Now we'll move on to the chair's report. First, I'd like to address the fiscal year 21 budget amendment proposal that is before the board today. Again, the board would like to thank everyone who took the time to give us their feedback on the fiscal year 21 budget amendment proposal. We'd also like to thank, in addition to the public and jurisdictional staff that weighed in on the various proposals, we'd like to thank the general manager and his team for helping us get there in the spirit of compromise and getting us to a final agreement. We listened to you, our customers and stakeholders, and we were able to retain some of the essential service. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for working through the very complicated issues, often compromising along the way to produce a budget that works best for the region in these unprecedented times. We will continue to work with our delegation and the incoming Biden administration to make our case for a bridge to get through the pandemic. Also, as we conclude the fiscal year 21 budget amendment process, I will reiterate that the general manager will present his fiscal year 22 operating and capital budget proposal next month during a special finance and capital committee meeting on December 4th at 9 a.m. From the work we have done to date, we are getting a sense of what the jurisdictions can afford and support for fiscal year 22, but the outlook is grim. While we must be practical about the economic realities, we are committed to Metro to being a strong partner in our region's recovery, which means providing safe, reliable, and equitable service. We have a monumental job ahead, and we are working through it with the best information we have month by month. This concludes my report. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Wiedefeld, the general manager, for his report. Mr. Wiedefeld.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. On the budget, first I want to thank you, Chairman Smedberg, and the Finance Chair, Steve McMillan, for your leadership through this unprecedented budget year, for sure. Thanks to your forward-looking approach, the board has kept the agency well positioned to respond to uncertain conditions, to continue our core service to the public, and to provide responsible management to of our resources while reducing the adverse impacts on our workforce. No board in recent history has faced the challenges this board has faced, for sure. Unfortunately, without additional federal funds, the board will be further challenged in the development of the fiscal year 2022 budget, with the process starting next month, as you just referenced, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your support and the time you have invested to get us to where we are today, to all the board members, so thank you. The revised budget being considered today includes bus and rail service adjustments that reflect the feedback we received from our customers Importantly, maintaining the 11 p.m. closing time for Metro Rail and adding bus service improvements on 20 bus lines. Service changes if approved today, will go into effect in mid-February. And lastly, as a reminder, front door boarding and fare collection on Metro Bus remains on schedule to restart in early January. If I could move just to some service issues, particularly on the Blue Line work that we're doing. As the pandemic stretches on, we continue looking to accelerate major capital work where appropriate. Earlier this month, Metro announced plans to move forward with a project on the Blue Line in Virginia that modernizes the signal system in the Alexandria rail yard. This construction will replace all major components of the signal system in the rail yard where it connects to the Blue Line, including switches, signals, track circuits, and signal control rooms. Similar to this summer's rolling track work, this schedule will take advantage of historical low ridership, consolidating the project into a shorter series of outages that will close 2 stations, Franconia Springfield and Van Dorn Street. The work begins the Friday after Thanksgiving and will take place over 10 weekends. In addition to the weekend shutdowns, a 2-week shutdown is planned for the winter holiday period when ridership typically drops even further. For further information, customers are encouraged to visit WMATA.com. I also have asked Teresa, our safety officer, to give an update on COVID, but before turning it over to her for that update, I want to publicly express my condolences to the family and friends of the second colleague we've lost over the weekend due to COVID. The passing last weekend of one of our store clerks after a month-long illness is part of a troubling trend, unfortunately, that we have recently experienced as the region sees the virus resurging. I want to remind everyone, customers and employees, just how important it is to remain diligent by wearing the face coverings, keeping social distancing, and following all the other CDC guidance. Safety remains Metro's #1 priority, and we can only provide the existing bus and rail service so long as our employees remain safe and healthy. We're all in this together. That means we need everyone's help to take every precaution possible to make sure we don't slip back into the tough situation we faced last spring. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will now have Teresa give an update on the COVID efforts of Metro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudefeld.
Thank you, sir. As WMATA continues to respond to the pandemic, we are working to provide services for essential travel that provide the highest levels of safety for our employees and customers. In prior briefings to the board, I've detailed the steps that we've taken to protect our employees and customers, including enhancing our cleaning and disinfection programs on our trains, buses, and in our facilities. We continue to perform daily cleaning and disinfection in accordance with CDC guidance using EPA-approved disinfections. We continue to perform third-party deep cleaning of our facilities and equipment in response to reports of ill customers or presumptive positive cases, and maintain a regular schedule for third-party deep cleaning and disinfection of our facilities to supplement our internal cleaning efforts. We're doing our part to keep our facilities and equipment safe for our customers and to encourage our customers to continue to adhere to CDC guidance, including social distancing, wearing a facial covering, and practicing hand hygiene. To that end, we are continuously monitoring conditions throughout the system and are working to rapidly respond to reports of crowding. Additionally, Metro has equipped stations with hand sanitizers and offers individually wrapped facial coverings in the event a customer needs one. Metro's procurement and supply chain management teams have been working around the clock to ensure that adequate supplies of materials are available. With regard to facial coverings, Metro has provided over 300,000 facial coverings to customers and maintains a supply of nearly 700,000 currently in stock. Average customer consumption of facial coverings has remained steady at around 100,000 per month, resulting in a 6-month supply on hand, which is continuously monitored to ensure adequate stock levels are always available. For employees, Metro has issued over 1.6 million facial coverings and masks, with an additional 1.8 million items available in stock. Metro has distributed over 2,500 gallons of hand sanitizer throughout the system, and we continue to monitor supply levels. Throughout the pandemic, we've worked with local, state, and federal experts to evaluate and align our response protocols. We've worked closely with public health experts to ensure that our response is both comprehensive and aligned with the latest guidance from the CDC. We've performed multiple evaluations of new and emerging technology, along with products in a scientifically rigorous manner to identify opportunities to improve safety and reduce risk. In tandem with these evaluations and test programs, we've maintained our existing and proven cleaning and disinfection protocols. We appreciate the collaboration of the region and the industry. I'm pleased to report yesterday Metro hosted our first coronavirus testing event for employees at our Andrews bus facility. Over 400 asymptomatic employees received COVID-19 tests. We will hold additional testing events in the future for our employees to supplement the jurisdictional testing resources available. Lastly, I'd like to review our current case data. To date, Metro has received 495 reports of COVID-19 infection among our workforce, with 435 having recovered and returned to work. There are currently 2 hospitalized employees, and we are saddened to report that we have had 2 employee deaths from COVID-19. We recognize that behind these numbers are countless families, loved ones, and communities affected by the pandemic, and affirm our commitment to protecting the health and welfare of our employees and customers. This concludes our COVID-19 update for the month of November.
Thank you, Teresa and Mr. Wiedefeld, or Ms. Emposado and Mr. Wiedefeld. I'll go around the table here, so to speak, and if people have any questions for the general manager, the safety officer, Ms. Gideby.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman.
I don't have any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horner.
None, thank you.
Mr. Letourneau.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Meridian.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Graham.
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. McMillan.
No questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Teresa, for all you do on behalf of our writers and the employees in the organization. And Mr. Wiedefeld, thank you for your report as well. Now I'll turn the chair or turn things over to the Finance Committee Chair, Mr. Steve McMillan, for the Finance Committee report. Steve.
Thank you. This morning, staff sought approval for actions to revise the fiscal year 2021 budget. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the following. Approval of the compact public hearing staff report for proposed changes to bus and rail service. Approval of the Title VI equity analysis of the proposed changes. Approval of service changes shown in attachment C of the resolution. And repeal of the previously approved fiscal year 2021 service and fare changes shown in attachments E and F of resolution 2020-09. Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Graham. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we'll go around for discussion. Ms. Gideby, any comments or questions?
No comments or questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman.
No, I stand by my comments from the earlier Finance Committee meeting this morning. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rouse, who's filling in for Mr. Horner, who's recused from this item.
Yeah, no further questions or comments from me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Letourneau.
Yeah, I'll also stand by what I said this morning in Finance Committee and just once again thank everybody for their work on this.
Thank you. Mr. Meridian.
No further questions or comments.
Thank you. Mr. Graham.
No further questions or comments.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With no further comments, I'll ask Ms. Ellison to call the roll.
Chair Smedberg.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gideby.
Aye.
Vice Chair Goldman.
Aye.
Alternate Director Rouse.
Aye.
Director Letourneau.
Piggy button. Aye.
Alternate Director Meridian.
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham.
Aye.
Director McMillan.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you all very much. Now we'll move on to the...
That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Now we'll go on to the report by the Safety and Operations Committee, and I'll turn it over to the chair of that committee, Michael Goldman, for his report. Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The following item was referred to the board at earlier today's Safety and Operations Committee meeting. Staff sought approval of jurisdictional requests for name changes at 2 Metro Rail stations. Tyson's Corner would be renamed Tyson's, and the Prince George's Plaza station would be renamed Hyattsville Crossing. Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. We have a motion and a second. Now we'll go around for discussion. Ms. Gideby, any questions or comments?
I just want to bring in my concerns about just the public feedback overall, particularly on the Prince George's County or Prince George's Plaza to Hyattsville Crossing. In addition to the public comments that we received as feedback, I'll be planning to abstain from this vote, recognizing that it is a jurisdictional priority. And so that's where I'll stand.
Thank you, Ms. Gideby. Mr. Goldman, any comments, or do you want to close it out?
No, thank you. No comments. I would support the action that came from the committee this morning.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Horner.
I have no comments. Thanks.
Mr. Letourneau.
Nothing further from me.
Mr. Meridian.
No comments, thanks.
Mr. Graham.
No further.
And Mr. McMillan.
No further comments, thanks. Making sure I was off mute.
No problem. Mr. McMillan.
No comments, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ellison, with no further comments, please take the roll.
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gideby,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Goldman,
Aye.
Director Horner,
Aye.
Director Letourneau,
Aye.
Alternate Director Meridian,
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham,
Aye.
Director McMillan.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. The item is approved. Now we have 2 consent items before us today. I'd like to move approval of the following: indemnification of parking operators for Station Manager Parking Initiative. Staff seeks board approval to execute parking space agreements with up to 25 property owners and/or parking operators, which agreements may include indemnification provisions. And second, parking fee waiver for Addison Road Station Project. Staff seeks board authorization, waiving all parking fees at Addison Road Metro Station as a courtesy for customers while the station is closed for platform improvement project, which will last from mid-February to mid-May 2021. I move approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Gideby. Because these items are on consent, there is no discussion, and I'll ask Ms. Ellison to conduct the vote. Ms. Ellison?
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gideby,
Aye.
Vice Chair Goldman,
Aye.
Director Horner,
Aye.
Director Letourneau,
Aye.
Alternate Director Meridian,
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham,
Aye.
Director McMillan.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Thank you. The item is approved. Now we'll move on to reports by the jurisdictions. NVTC, I'd like to highlight that the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission each year is responsible for sending an annual report on WMATA to the General Assembly. That report was completed or is near completion and being finalized, and will be sent to the legislature prior to its session in the new year. Matt, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that covers it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Gideby, the District of Columbia.
No reports at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman, WSTC.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Federal Government, Mr. Horner.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further business to come before the board, we stand adjourned, and I will move to executive session. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Goldman. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 The ayes have it. We will now convene an executive session. Thank you all for joining us today.